Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be going over something that I've seen a ton of in the past few months, more so than at any point in all of my years of playing War Thunder. The topic of this video, as you may have guessed based on the title, is the immense amount of problems that people in the community feel that War Thunder has that really just aren't big deals. I won't name names because many of the YouTubers that do this make tons of quality content and oftentimes have many good points, but you can just search War Thunder problem for yourself and find tons of videos on things that are largely blown out of proportion for views. Heck, some people make a relative financial killing out of making short problem videos that get tons of views. As you all know, I try to maintain a very positive outlook on War Thunder, and I will maintain that outlook throughout this video. Again, I'm not calling anyone out in this video, but I am rather calling out the sentiment that War Thunder is this ugly monster that needs to be fixed and changed and molded to every whim of the community, especially the more vocal YouTubers, or else the game will die. Rather than supposedly poor and unfixable gameplay killing War Thunder, it is this sentiment that will end up killing the game. It will scare people away and convince current players that War Thunder is trash when really it isn't, largely by blowing small issues out of proportion. Unless it's game breaking like ghost shells and intense ping related to server issues, and maybe some random things having to do with serviceability and coding issues in general, War Thunder is and has been a great and constantly improving game. I'll be the first to admit, even I've made two of these quote-unquote problem videos. One in November of 2020 discussing what I thought was the need for more gameplay options in the interim versus the constant addition of content to War Thunder, and a much older video with me ranting about how the ME262 HG series should be in the game, with the latter video having poor audio quality and very little direction. Though I will not absolve myself of these sins, the newer video is basically just me going over things that I thought should be added to the game instead of releasing quite as many vehicles on the next patch. This said, by constantly pointing out the X or Y problem, especially on things that are so foundational and inherent to the type of game that War Thunder is, we're creating more issues. Heck, the videos could be well intentioned or just simply informing you of a minor issue in the game. The topics of these videos are themselves largely not issues, but rather the lack of explanation in the videos and the proliferation of a butchered version of the point made in the video. Almost like a game of telephone where the YouTuber or poster of the opinion says one thing and then it gets continually butchered throughout until it reaches its final destination and does not resemble the original message at all. One thing I do is that I try to make any video like this where I post an opinion as positive as possible and verbally state it numerous times throughout the video just so that the audience doesn't get the wrong idea or think that what I'm giving my opinion on is a terrible thing. Without that clarification, you'd likely have 10 or 20 or however many people that will spread a twisted version of the point made in the video, which will then infect other sections of the community and thus make the community less happy than it otherwise would be with the game. One could argue that by putting a light on these issues, almost like a War Thunder version of Plato's allegory of the cave, you are enlightening the player base, and this is partially true. The issue is that, with few exceptions as explained before, so many of the videos complain about things that are foundational and are only slightly changeable. Otherwise, the game would be entirely different, and likely in a negative way. Foundationally changing games on the whims of players is nothing new, however, as there are several examples throughout the gaming industry of this happening. One such example is a game called The Culling. This is a game where the developers had a great concept and a good game in general that happened to be the first, if not one of the first, true Battle Royale games. Long story short, it enjoyed a decent stretch of popularity on Steam a few years ago, and as more and more players started playing, the devs started to genuinely take the players' concerns to heart, to the point where they started to enact many changes that seemed to be what the players wanted. It wasn't just a few quality of life improvements, but rather like they took a suggestion box and implemented mostly everything in it. It got to the point where things were changing so often and without warning that the game was nearly totally different on a month-to-month basis. I saw this firsthand as I played many matches over a few months. The game died shortly after the changes became too much. Following this, The Culling 2 was released and had something like 30 players max on their servers at launch, and hardly 2 or 3 total players on their servers within 48 hours of launch. Now, this is an obviously extreme example, and many times player suggestions end up being great. Good examples of this in War Thunder would be customizable loadouts, of which have not yet been implemented, or better air-based defenses in RRB. But when devs start making major changes to fix minor issues that could be fixed with a screwdriver rather than a sledgehammer, also known as sweeping changes, it totally changes the game, and oftentimes for the worse. Like it or not, Gaijin has been fairly good at deciding what features should be added, removed, and fixed, and when these changes should occur. I for one would love to see the ME262 HG1 in-game. In fact, War Thunder released a tech tree outline around 2014 that I unfortunately cannot find to include in this video that shows that the HG series of planes was planned and would be coming to the game. In fact, these planes, or even just one of them, would help tremendously in the gap between the ME262A and C variants, adding a very different ME262 with greater maneuverability and speed, albeit with a similar mediocre rate of climb. I'm sure everyone watching this video has an idea or several ideas that they think would help to improve the game. I'm sure many of them actually would improve the game as it currently is. But oftentimes these improvements would clash with each other as others are implemented. That's why Gaijin is so selective as to what is added and when it's added. Heck, I would love for customizable loadouts to come out with the next patch, but unless it's been worked on for months or even possibly years, such a system rolled out across hundreds of different planes with totally different loadout capabilities could be an absolute disaster, no matter how much we all want it and how good of an idea customizable loadouts are for War Thunder. The fact is, unless a system is rolled out with perfection, the player base will riot and call War Thunder broken. A good example of this is volumetric shells. It still has many issues, sure, and had many more when it was first released, but who genuinely enjoyed the pre-volumetric shell world where a 150mm shell was modeled as the size of a 50 caliber round and could go through a slightly lesser armored 25mm gap in the front of a heavily armored TD? Oftentimes, the best solutions are not the ones that we as players come up with, and we need to accept that. Gaijin has worked on War Thunder as their cash cow for years, and though they do some questionable things from the perspective of veteran players, such as adding the Harrier GR1 at 9.3 BR, they keep a relatively tight ship in the form of a very playable, free-to-play game. Sure, some countries might have overpowered close air support compared to other countries, or the economy might not be ideal for grinding, especially for unestablished new players. These things stink, but are largely facts of life, especially considering the type of game that War Thunder is and will always be. Some nations just so happen to focus on one thing or another in the development of certain technologies and weapons in their history, and those things are on full display in War Thunder. The US has tons of close air support because they focused on that more than every other country in the world, whereas the Russians have light and maneuverable fighters through the MiG-21 because they focused on those aspects of their vehicles. We should embrace these things rather than say, why does the US have so much close air support? Why are Russian fighters so maneuverable? It's just how they did it. Although obviously I can still see a very strong argument for adding certain close air support with some countries in order to balance it out with another country, such as the US getting the A7D and the Russians getting whatever their equivalent may have been. In short, many of the quote-unquote problems in War Thunder are simply foundational aspects of the game that, while tweakable, are not entirely quote-unquote fixable, and are thus things that are a total waste of time to be upset about. We can suggest things to Gaijin, as they do listen to us as a community, but to constantly blast them and to get on every single train that is the newest quote-unquote problem, which has actually existed for years and is only a concern now due to some random YouTuber making it a concern, is ridiculous. We need to hold Gaijin accountable for utter failings, such as awful server latency and possible game-breaking bugs. But some things are so inherent to War Thunder, and for that matter, most games of this type, that it is healthier to put them out of sight and out of mind outside of the improvements that you might think are a positive step forward for the game. For my money, the foundation of War Thunder, especially when considering competitor games like World of Tanks and their developer, is so sound that to find issues with things like ultra low quality abuse or that one nation gets more of one type of vehicle than another is just silly. We should hold individuals accountable if they abuse ultra low quality, but that, along with about 95% of the rest of the game, are just aspects that really can't be changed all too much. Otherwise, Gaijin would lose a tremendous amount of revenue and the game would die or simply become worse. By removing, for example, ultra low quality as a graphics setting, you'd be effectively removing a very large portion of the community that just simply cannot afford a better computer, or just aren't willing to do it, which would really limit the game and would be kicking more or less innocent players out of the player base. To suffer from the occasional jerk that abuses the system is a small price to pay for what I consider to be one of my favorite games, and for my money, one of the best free-to-play games and best educational tools for military vehicle history that one could imagine. Every system has their abuses, and every system has their faults, but I'd like to imagine that once you cut out the people complaining about things relating to their own poor skill in game and things that are barely changeable, you'll find that War Thunder is better run than almost every other game out there, and for that, I'm grateful. We should never stop calling Gaijin out for their misgivings or horrible BR placement, as those can be valid concerns, especially in the case of the Harrier GR1 when it was first released. But unless Gaijin goes off the deep end, there aren't things that are so horrible where the game is unplayable. The grind stinks, but it's part of Gaijin's business plan and is workable for most players with some level of skill and maybe some premium time. Biometric shells stink sometimes, but they're an improvement over what used to exist. Heck, Battle Pass and crafting events might seem like they stink too, but you don't even have to participate, and if you do, you get extra rewards that would otherwise not exist, thereby making War Thunder a better game. Heck, there's even free Battle Pass rewards. Why not do it? Look, I know that this has been a long video, but I just want to end it on this note. Before we consider all the bad, and there has been some, we need to remember the best parts about War Thunder and encourage people to do the same. Once we identify what's best about War Thunder, we can start to fix the genuinely worst aspects of it, and in the process, make it a more popular game with an expanded player base that will allow for War Thunder to thrive for many years to come. That is and always should be the goal. Appreciate what we have and try to make it a better place while accepting the fundamental truths of what can and cannot be changed. That all said, thanks so much for watching, everyone. I know that this has been a long video, as I just mentioned, and probably something somewhat controversial when given the context of the War Thunder community, so every thumbs up would really be a great thing for me. Even some thumbs down. I understand if you don't like my opinion, that's fine. I'm not forcing you to like it, but if you could please subscribe if you like my content. Certainly, again, like this video if you liked it. Comment, tell me what you guys think in the comments below. I want to hear your opinions about what War Thunder is, and if people complaining is really a big problem, because I, for one, think that it kind of is, and it's not good for the future of War Thunder, especially when it's about minor things that get blown way out of proportion. But that being said, thanks again so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.